In 1747, Simon Fraser, Lord Lovat, was executed in London for treason, rebelling against his king. But it was the start of a mystery. This man, who was the last to be beheaded by the British state for treason, was buried apparently in London. But his family have always maintained that he was brought back up to his native Highland and buried in the family mausoleum here in Wardle. Today, we're going to open his coffin and find out the truth. In the late 1660s, a baby was born in a house now demolished on the banks of this burn in the Highlands of Scotland. That child would grow into Simon Fraser, the 11th Lord Lovat, a man whose life and career typified the wild life up here in the Highlands in the 18th century. A world of political jockeying, violence, blood feuds, and tested loyalties. He was, in many ways, the last Highlander. Sarah Fraser is a member of the family and has written the definitive biography of Simon Fraser, so she knows his complex life story better than anyone.
You call him Simon Fraser, you call him Lord Lovat. He's also Machshimi Mord to his Gaelic kin. He's the great Simon. They would never call him Lord Lovat. It's a British title. And of course, to the government and Hogarth, he's the old fox. So he lives in so many worlds. And what I like personally is that he was born to none of this. This should not have happened. He's the second son of the second son of a chief. So he's quite a long way out. And by hook or by crook, by luck and guile, he gets to the top. That's why I really like him.
Young Simon could never really have expected to become clan chief of the Frasers. He's only very distantly related to the existing clan chief. But then a lack of male heirs, a series of fortuitous deaths, including the death of his older brother in battle, meant that in his early 20s, Simon found that he had the best claim to be clan chief. But even then, other clans tried to absorb Clan Fraser, and he was never really secure in his claim, well, for decades. And he entered a series of internecine squabbles, legal, violent, all different kinds, to try and assert his claim to be clan chief and ownership of these fertile lands.
By the time he becomes heir, two clans stand ready, predatory clans stand ready to tear Clan Fraser apart. It's really weak. These early deaths have exposed the leadership at the top. Weak leadership never works. And if it wasn't for the force of his personality, the clan would have gone under and there'd be no Frasers today.
In an effort to consolidate his control over these lands, Simon Fraser does something so brutal, its consequences would be felt for decades.
What he does, when the late chief dies, which makes him the hereditary male heir, and the two clans get ready to tear it apart, he tries to get between them and he forces a marriage on the widow of the late Lord Lovat. Now, she is the daughter of a marquis, related to the crowned heads of Europe. Her brother, they call the Viceroy of Scotland. He's holding Scotland for William III. What young Simon Fraser, now Lord Lovat, does is he gets a band of men. They go galloping down to Castle Downey. They say the parson was called for and the bagpipe blown up. And she was asked, do you want to marry me? And what? Couldn't hear her answer. Doesn't matter, it's going to happen. He forces a marriage on her and consummates it. And the next day, all hell breaks loose, which it'll take him about 15 years to recover from. Better be a hell of a night.
This was an attack on the most powerful family in Scotland, the Athol Murrays, and they wanted revenge.
What they do is they raise a lawsuit against him for, they call it rape and heimsucken. It's the ravishing of persons of consequence in their own homes, and it's a capital crime. So he flees, and in absentia they try him, he's outlawed, forfeit, he's lost everything. So in this moment when he gets everything, at the turn of the century, he loses it all and he flees for his life.
Simon Fraser is now a wanted man, forced to go into hiding. I'm up on the roof of Cawdor Castle, a magnificent castle just outside Inverness, and I've climbed up a few secret stairs and ladders, and here, amongst the gables, is a roof space where it's said that Simon Fraser hid to escape being captured and executed. The legend has it that he spent 3 days up here, and I can see why he didn't stay for longer. It must have been pretty miserable. This was not a long-term solution to his problems. And he spent the next few years tearing around Scotland and elsewhere with his enemies in pursuit. While he was on the run, an outlaw, his father died, making him Lord Lovat. But he couldn't return to his ancestral homelands and stake his claim because he was still a wanted man. He finds sanctuary with the Stuarts, who are also in exile just outside Paris. There, he pledges allegiance to the Jacobite cause, and he helps to formulate an invasion plan to put the young prince, James Edward Stuart, on the British throne.
He was always a natural Stuart supporter and a Jacobite instinctively. It was tied up also, I think, with his own troubles, in that these are by hereditary right, as even Dr. Johnson admitted, 20, 30, 50 years later, these are by hereditary right the heirs to the thrones of Britain. And he, just as he has been put out of Clan Fraser, he wouldn't think that the Stuarts should be put off the throne at all. And so he is instinctively a Jacobite. These are the rulers of Scotland. He's also a Scottish nationalist. So he'd be quite happy if they came back and just ruled Scotland. But it's never as simple as that with Simon, because this invasion doesn't happen. And the longer he's away from Scotland, the more likely it is that these two predatory clans, the Mackenzies and the Murrays, are actually going to embed themselves in Clan Fraser and take it over. So he loses patience. He can't play a long game, Simon. He cannot play a long game. Young man's impatience. So he then sneaks back and he offers to sell the Jacobites out to the Duke of Queensberry. And that causes a huge scandal. And he has to flee then back to France again. And Louis XIV has had enough. He likes him, personally, he really likes him, but he locks him up in Saumur for 10 years, just to stop him doing anything else.
He's tried to play both sides and ended up in prison in France. Back in England, James's older half-sister, Queen Anne, is monarch. Although she's a Stuart, she isn't regarded as legitimate by the Jacobites. But history is about to take another dramatic turn. In 1714, the last Stuart monarch died, Queen Anne. She was succeeded not by members of her Stuart family, but by a fairly distant cousin, the Hanoverian German Prince George I. Now, almost immediately there was a big rebellion in Scotland, the 1715. Jacobites rose up to try and insist that the Stuarts would be put back on the throne. Now, this was the chance that Simon Fraser had been waiting for. He was in exile in France, but he realised if he could come back here, talk his clansmen out of supporting the Jacobite cause, then the new kings of Britain would issue him the pardon and reinstate him to his former position. So he made his way up here to the Highlands, and outside Inverness, he met up with his clan and persuaded them to back the Hanoverians, not the Stuarts.
He's telling them that they've got to support the new regime, help bed in the new regime, which has his head but not his heart. I think that's what it comes down to. His head is telling him this is where the future lies, and his heart has just got to keep quiet for a while.
So having switched sides several times already, he ends up fighting alongside the British Crown to take Inverness back from the Jacobites. The rebellion is defeated, and at last he finds himself on the winning side. In gratitude, the king restores his title and pardons him for past crimes. Finally, he's able to regain control of the family mausoleum here in Wardlaw, just west of Inverness. I met with Eric Lundberg, the custodian of the site. Beautiful position on top of this hill,
Isn't it just?
It's very grand, that sort of tower on top, isn't it?
Well, but remember what you're seeing here is the building as modified by Simon the Fox.
Okay.
So in its original state, it was the same floor plan, but about 3 feet lower, and had a thatch roof, just like the church had.
I like the idea that Simon the Fox added this very sort of military tower to it. That seems to tell me a little bit about
The
it. personally.
partisans, yeah, it's cracking into it.
So how did you get into being the expert in all things Wardlaw?
Well, I don't know if I'm the expert, but I've been the custodian for more officially about 10 years and involved with the building for getting on near 20. I just happened to live here and was asked to look after this key, and just grew out of that, being asked, what is this building, what's it for, who's in here, and I had to learn.
So you were a keeper of the key, and then before you know it, you're the world's leading expert. I'm very impressed. Right, come on, let's get you in
Well,
here.
I think you have to do
Oh,
the key.
yes. Wow, certainly got lots of atmosphere. So what are we looking at here? What was the purpose of this building?
Right, so it was built in 1634 because the Lovats no longer had Bewley Priory available to them after the Scottish Reformation. The roof came off, couldn't use that, so they come here instead.
So they need a new
family burial vault.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, indeed. And the Lord Lovat died, was buried about here behind a curious timber palisade while they built the building around her.
Really?
This is the gable wall of that previous parish church, and our building just built off that.
So the Lord Lovats are all buried in here
Since 1634.
since 1634. What about the Fox? What's his relationship with this building?
So this was his family vault, which he intended to use for himself. But when he was recognised as Lord Lovat after his support for the Hanoverian government, following the 1715 rebellion, in 1722 he wanted to show off to his neighbours how important a man he now was in the Highlands, and spent money in here. So I tell our guests this is bling from 1722, all designed to impress.
Because he'd been a fugitive, hadn't he? So he hadn't been able to bury his dad properly, I suppose.
Correct.
So this was like coming home. I'm back. I'm going to give my dad
Not a burial, monument. This is the monument to Simon's father, Thomas, Lord Fraser of Lovat. Thomas is actually buried at Kilmuir Graveyard next to Dunvegan Castle on Skye, because Simon's mother was Sibylla, daughter of MacLeod of Dunvegan.
Okay.
So Simon had sent his dad across to Dunvegan for safekeeping during all the troubles in the late 1690s, and he had died there. And then once Simon was Lord Lovat, he could build the monument to his father and improve the building at the same time.
Simon's memorial to his father dominates the room. And I think it provides a fascinating insight into the mind of the Fox. First of all, what's so striking about it is it's a Baroque, magnificent memorial with its Corinthian column tops and its pediment. This is a man saying, yes, he's a rough, tough Highland chief, but he's laying claim to be part of a pan-European aristocracy, one of letters and hugely cultured. But what's equally interesting is actually the words he uses. The first few lines are about his dad, but most of it is about himself. The monument was erected by Simon Lord Fraser of Lovat, his son, who likewise, having undergone many great vicissitudes of good and bad fortune through the malice of his enemies, he in the end, at the head of his clan, forced his way to his paternal inheritance with his sword in his hand. He's written his own epitaph on his father's memorial. At last, Simon Fraser has achieved his life's goal and become leader of the Fraser clan.
He becomes an establishment man. He becomes the sheriff of Inverness at one time. He marries another Hanoverian laird's daughter. He has 4 children. I mean, he's a late starter in their terms, because by 1715, he's in his 40s. He has 4 children, actually loses his wife, he marries again, and he does live here in grand style as a Highland chief. And he manages to ride those 2 horses for an awful long time. Honourable service to the crown, being one of those people who holds the Highlands for them, and also living according to the ethic and culture and values of clanship. So he's a very good laird.
But after 30 years of relative peace, Simon Fraser is once again caught up in the world of power and politics. In 1745, Bonnie Prince Charlie, the heir to the Stuart family, landed here in Scotland and drove government forces from Scotland. He then advanced his army deep into England, reaching Derby before he turned round. Having spent his life playing both sides, Simon now had to choose whether or not to back Bonnie Prince Charlie.
I think that what happens is Lovat, that instinctive Jacobitism, when he sees his success, there's that kind of old siren song of the Stuarts, which so many of the clan chiefs can't resist, and he throws his hat in the ring with him, and he makes his last appalling judgment call. This one, there's no coming back from this one. Never.
The scene was set for what would be the last pitched battle on British soil, as Prince Charlie fought to gain the throne for his family. In early 1746, his forces faced a British army commanded by his cousin, the Duke of Cumberland, here on the battlefield of Culloden. Now, the Fraser clan were here. Old Simon Fraser, Lord Lovat, wasn't. Perhaps he was too old. Perhaps he was still hedging his bets slightly. He'd been late to declare for Bonnie Prince Charlie. He'd stayed aloof to start with and had only thrown his lot in with the Jacobites when he'd seen them doing so well. So his clan was here, commanded by a relative. They would stand here in the centre of the Jacobite line and take part in what was to be a climactic battle for the throne of Britain. The Clan Fraser, together with the other clansmen in the Jacobite lines, tore across this field. It was said like packs of hungry wolves. They hurled themselves at the British army, but around about here, 200 metres out, 100 metres out from the British lines, they ran into a wall of firepower. The British army was one of the most well-drilled forces in Western Europe. Cannons were packed with canister, that's canisters full of musket balls that turned each cannon into a giant shotgun, and they ripped through Jacobite ranks. Then the British infantry started firing. They were in 3 ranks. That meant that each rank fired one after the other, so every 8 seconds a hail of musket balls tore into the Jacobite lines. The result was an appalling slaughter, almost comparable with the slaughters of the 20th century. In the space of a few moments, over 1,000 men, perhaps 1,500 men, were cut down on this battlefield, among them many in the Clan Fraser. Those men are now buried in pits on the battlefield itself. You can still make out these rounded tops here, and 100 years later headstones were put in. It's not certain that the Clan Fraser are all buried here, but there would have been clansmen. There would have been Lord Lovat's men buried under and near this headstone. Simon Fraser had played both sides in the civil wars that had ripped through Scotland and Britain ever since he'd been a young man. But this time, 1746, the British Hanoverians had decisively won. The Stuarts were consigned to history, and Simon Fraser had found himself completely on the losing side. Even the fox wouldn't be able to get his way out of this one. Simon Fraser is once again on the run, but he's now in his 80s. He doesn't get far before the British capture him.
There are 2 men of war, the Furnace and the Terror. I told you their attitude to pacifying the Highlands, and nosing their way in and out of the west coast, and they pick him up, and he is the biggest prize, because others have got away. Murray's got away, the Prince has got away, a lot of the other key players have got away, and they are delighted to get him. I mean, Cumberland says, he ranks high in command with titles, and what a triumph this is to get hold of him.
He's taken to London. On his way, he stops at an inn in St Albans, where he met the artist William Hogarth. Hogarth's portrait of him is now the best-known image of Simon Fraser. He was then imprisoned in the Tower of London. He was put on trial in 1747 for treason, tried by his fellow peers in Westminster Hall in the Houses of Parliament. It was a foregone conclusion that after a week he was found guilty and sentenced to the classic traitor's death, hanging, drawing and quartering. In one last gesture, King George commuted that to death by beheading. On the 9th of April 1747, Lord Lovat was brought from the Tower out to Tower Hill, where traditionally traitors had been executed. It was a huge event. Hastily erected stands were made to accommodate all the spectators, one of which collapsed, leading to the death of something like 9 people. Lord Lovat had a wry smile when he saw that. He was brought here. Among his last words was the quote from the Latin poet, "Dulce et decorum est pro patria mori." It is sweet and proper to die for your country. In his mind, he was dying as a Scottish patriot. He was brought here and executed by beheading. The last man to be beheaded for treason in Britain. Callum Fraser is descended from the chiefs of the Clan Fraser, and he's come to the Tower to play for his ancestor. Callum, that was amazing.
Thank you very much.
It's haunting. What was that?
So that was Lord Lovat's lament, and it's sometimes it can be played in 6/8, but it's a lot slower, more kind of haunting version of it.
And what is a lament?
So a lament is a tune that's written kind of in an aftermath of a kind of monumental experience or occasion.
This would have been written by his pipers in 1747.
It was, yeah. So it's slightly disputed whether he had 2 pipers. So there was Ewan McGregor and David Fraser, and David was kind of junior piper, so it's disputed between who wrote it, but certainly one of those 2 were definitely the author of the tune.
And you are a Fraser.
I am, certainly, yeah. I am descended from Lord Lovat himself.
so is it quite amazing for you to be playing that lament on just near the site of his death?
It is, it really is incredible. I mean, you hear, when you're in there, you hear about, he's mentioned as the last aristocrat to have his head chopped off, and it's something quite amazing to play that and kind of feel that kind of historic moment, I think.
Simon Fraser was the last of many so-called traitors to be executed on this site. So this is a really remarkable memorial on Tower Hill, and it commemorates some of the people who were killed here by the English and the British state for treason. And it reads like a who's who from our history, a remarkable collection, usually of aristocratic claimants to the throne and rebels. You've got Edward Plantagenet, the Earl of Warwick, killed in 1499, basically for having a better claim to the throne than Henry VII. You got Sir Thomas More, Henry VIII's chief minister, who refused to back his breach with Rome and paid the ultimate price. Who else have we got here? We've got William Laud, Archbishop of Canterbury under Charles I, James, Duke of Monmouth, illegitimate son of Charles II, who rebelled against his uncle, James II. And right down here, at the very end, we have Simon Fraser, Lord Lovat, the last high-profile aristocrat to be executed for treason. But this is not where the story ends, because traditionally these rebels were taken into the Tower of London and buried in a shallow grave. But Lord Lovat's clansmen, his family, have always insisted that he had a different fate. The family have long believed that his body was in fact taken back to Scotland and laid to rest in the family vault at Wardlaw. Sarah even has a theory for how it happened.
2 of his Fraser kin were there, and they said, can we take him home to bury him under the skies in his home, his resting place? And initially the government said yes. So they got a man called Mr. Stevenson to collect the body, and out it went to his undertakers in Craven Street. And that was fine. And then about 5 days later, the Lieutenant General of the Tower heard that Stevenson was displaying the body for a penny a pop, so that people could come in and see this big, Jacobite symbol, you know. And they were incensed because the last thing they wanted was to put any fuel back in the Jacobite fire. You know, they were, because yes, you'd get people coming there to hiss and boo, but you'd also maybe get secret Jacobites coming saying, we'll be back, you know, and make a martyr of him. And so Cornwallis from Whitehall sent in a furious letter saying, get that body back in the Tower. And the Lieutenant General sent his message to the two Frasers, bring him back now. And another 5 days went past, and then a body came back in a coffin. But we don't know whose it was. I mean, he's been out of the Tower for 10 days. How do we know what came back?
The answer lies in the family vault at Wardlaw. So obviously it makes sense that Simon the Fox, Lord Lovat, wanted to be buried here. He'd built the place.
Absolutely, for himself. Sure.
It all makes sense when you see
And he had been given permission to do so until the government changed their minds.
Right, well, where's the crypt?
Okay, let's go. So,
Aha, look at it.
to take a ring for me?
Okay.
Very heavy.
Right. What an adventure. Is that all right?
Okay. I'll do it down. Now,
Okay.
mind your head, and the steps are not all the same height.
I can say that again. This is brilliant. This is the family crypt of the Lovats.
Yep.
Look at that sweet little one there. Is that
I
a
know.
child?
It is indeed. So, can I explain to you who we have in here?
Yeah.
On our left here is a person we think is Simon the Fox.
That's the exciting one. Okay.
Absolutely. Next to us in front here is General Simon, who raised the 78th Fraser Highlanders and then his 71st Fraser Highlanders.
And fought in North America.
North America, basically, yes indeed.
For the king that executed his father.
Absolutely. Well, it was his method of getting back into the good grace of the Hanoverian regime, because after the 45, Simon lost not only the title but also the estates. So he had no job, no money, no career, and had to invent something new in the new political reality. And also these are lead coffins. When they were placed down here, they would have been inside a decorative timber coffin with the nice nameplates and handles and so on. Simon's one is rather special because he had a timber inner coffin, a lead coffin, a second lead coffin, and then a timber outer coffin. So I can't imagine the difficulty had getting that weight down here in the first place.
And so, let me get this right. Simon Fraser the Fox, executed at the Tower of London.
Yep.
It's said he's buried in London, but
Correct.
It's always been believed by the family, by the community up here, that he was brought back and buried in his family crypt.
Absolutely. The Fraser family story has been that the body was intercepted on the way to the Tower by friends or family and was brought home in an Inverness merchant ship called the Pledger. And it came up to Inverness, up the Bewley Firth, and then Simon's brought up here on the quiet and placed down here in a timber coffin with no external nameplate or code because he wasn't meant to be here.
The coffin might not have had an external nameplate, but there was a panel on the inside of the wooden coffin that once contained this inner lead coffin.
We have this, which is the nameplate from Simon's coffin.
It's in Latin,
It's
so
in
I'm
Latin,
struggling a little bit.
Yep, my Latin's pretty poor too, but it says in English, in this coffin are laid the remains of Simon, Lord Fraser Lovat, who, with the greatest distinction and renown, at the risk of his life, restored and preserved his race, clan and household from the tyranny of the Athol and the treacherous plotting of the Mackenzies of Tarbert. At the bottom you might see a crest. You might be aware that you can see a 5-pointed crown on top. And apparently that in heraldry that signifies a dukedom.
Oh yeah.
And you'll remember, I'm sure, that one of the prices that Simon demanded of Bonnie Prince Charlie for his support was to be made a duke, and he would not act until he received the letters patent confirming his dukedom.
So that is a sign that whoever did this knew that Simon
Correct.
was a duke. So he was
I think it's Simon who had this dictated in London. That is all about the inheritance period in the 1690s, not mentioned Jacobite, but this is
That's a subtle sign.
a subtle sign. For those who understand it, which would be virtually nobody in London, but those who are important knew. And he was saying, nah. He's having the last laugh.
He's having the last laugh because he's been buried a duke.
Yeah. Again, it was only for the family to smirk and know it was there. The public outside were unaware. In fact, when the building was visited in the 1850s, it was reported that there was no plate saying Simon Lord Lovat, therefore it was assumed he was not here and therefore lies in London, where the government said he was. But they didn't know at that stage that this plate was inside the timber coffin.
And now, tomorrow, at dawn, we find out if that's true or not. We're going to open up that coffin for the first time in 250 years.
That's right. It's going to be very exciting.
The investigation is being led by one of the world's most respected forensic anthropologists, Professor Sue Black and her team from Dundee University. We're suited up to protect us from the lead dust and to protect the remains from contamination. In charge of removing the remains from the coffin is Dr. Lucina Hackman. It's time to open the coffin.
Do you mind taking the big end?
Okay, yeah.
I think that's probably safest. So, 1, 2, 3. Oh, it's going to be heavy because it's lead. So, what we've got is what we'd expect, a wooden coffin within the lead outer coffin. And you can see we've got the lid, or what was the lid, but that's deteriorated quite a lot, so we'll need to lift that off.
Wow. Okay.
And take that
so this
away.
wood's 250 years old, is it?
It would have been what was put in
Wow, this is
originally,
the original
yes.
coffin. Okay, here we go.
So, you can see the original. So if I just hand that to you.
Yeah.
We'll just very carefully lift it off.
Okay, great. Wow.
And
What are we seeing?
that'll expose the inner areas. So what we're seeing here, you can still see the edges of the wooden coffin. Here, you can see the top and you can see the bottom. This is collapsed a bit. And what we are seeing some bones. So we're seeing some bones here. You can see a few here. You can see some bones. They're vertebrae.
Really?
Some distal femur. Yes. So I think probably what we need to do is very systematically start taking the contents from this end and gradually take them out and then examine them carefully upstairs. So that's the next step.
Is this? You've seen so many bodies and burials. Is this typical? Does this look like it's been like? Are you able to make any other judgments about its condition at the moment?
The condition isn't great, from what I can see at the moment. Because of time, bone decomposes, as does any part of the body. Teeth tend to decompose the slowest.
Okay.
Soft tissue goes quicker, and bone decomposes slowly. If you've got the right environment, it can become stable and last for a very long time. But in the wrong environment, it will decompose. And what you have here is a situation where the coffin design will have kept the damp in. So whatever damp was there as the body decomposed will stay. And damp isn't very good for bone at all.
But so it's good that some of it seems to have survived.
Yes.
It doesn't look much like a body to me, but Lucina is starting to identify some remains.
Trying to work out what we've got. So I think we've got here, these are the femora, so these are the thigh bones. This is a line of the thigh bone coming down here. You see this line here, that's the shaft of the femur.
Yeah.
This, for example, that's actually preserved really nicely. So I think we're going to get some preservation. This is a bone. This is a bone of the heel of the foot.
Yeah.
So it's a calcaneus. So this is another foot bone here. It's a talus which sits on top of the calcaneus. So the bones of the heel here. So they're quite nicely preserved, but they're very stocky. If you think about the fact that that takes all your body weight on a regular basis as you're walking, they're really robust bones anyway in life. So they tend to last better.
Anything Lucina finds is taken up for Sue to examine in detail.
So you can see that there's very dark colour. So what's happened with the bones is as the body decomposes, the fluid's slightly acidic.
Okay.
And so the fluid mixes with the wood on the inside of the coffin, and you form something called humic acid.
Oh.
And it effectively would have looked a bit like chocolate mousse. And so the bones take up the colour of that dark wood around it.
It's quite hard down there to tell which is bone.
What's bone and what's wood, because it takes on the colour of it. So that's what it's done. So this is bone. It's very light and it's very fragile because it's been quite wet in the bone, in the coffin. And this is the right heel bone. So this is the heel at the back.
Yeah.
This is the bit that's going forward onto the foot. So that's the calcaneus. This is the talus. And so that's the bone that sits on there like that.
I think from what I can see, it's clearly the body of a beheaded 70-something-year-old man.
Did you do that from 2 bones of the foot? You're good. You're
Well,
so
you know.
good.
Maybe I'm better off leaving it to the profession. Before long, some better preserved bones start to appear.
Thank you, Mom. Oh, that's much better. Now we've got something identifiable. So that's vertebra, that's the lower end of the knee, and that's the sacrum, which is in very good condition.
Where's the sacrum?
The sacrum is the bit of the pelvis. You know the pelvis is a ring,
Yeah.
and you've got the vertebral column coming down on the top of it.
Yeah.
So all those individual vertebrae sit on the sacrum, which is a
Just
part of
there.
it. Exactly, it's right down in your bottom.
Okay.
It's called sacrum because it was the sacred part. It was believed that that was where your soul lay, in your sacrum.
Yeah.
And when all else disappeared, your sacrum, the sacred part of you, would survive.
That's true of this guy.
It survived very well, actually. And what we can tell, because there's no fusion line, if that line across there was open,
Yeah.
we'd have somebody who's less than 25.
Oh,
So we know
yes,
it's
the
older than
first
25.
clue. That's very exciting.
And we also know it's a man.
Why do we know it's a man?
We know it's a man because when you look at the sacrum, in men, this is bigger, and these are smaller, and in women, this is smaller, and these are bigger.
It's a man over the
It's
age
a
of
man.
25. We're in the right ballpark.
And it's a man who's probably elderly, because you can see the build-up of bone there is elderly.
So you're like Sherlock Holmes. So we've got a man, it's certainly a man, certainly over 25, and probably elderly.
Could be.
I'm liking the
could
sound
be,
of this.
Could be, yep, it's looking good to me, I have to say.
That's not bad for the second box. You are the best. Sue has also identified parts of the backbone. And we're quite interested in vertebrae, aren't we? Because if he did get his head chopped off, the vertebrae are going to show it.
These are too low down.
Okay.
So these are thoracic vertebrae. These are in the back, just between your shoulder blades. But can you see that there's a little bridge runs
Yes.
across there? They're fused.
Fused.
So that happens with old age.
Nice.
We still like that.
We like
We
that.
still like that a lot. Now this is going to get much more interesting. This is a vertebra, but it's a vertebra heading up towards the neck region.
Oh,
It's got no cut marks on it that I can see yet,
okay.
but it's heading in the right direction. So it's good to know that those vertebrae are surviving. And the difference between them, if you remember the other one was round,
Yep.
see how this one's longer
Yeah.
and thinner? So that makes it a neck vertebra rather than a small of your back vertebra.
Okay.
But it's not been cut.
No sign of cut.
No sign of cut. You really want a miracle first bone out, don't you?
As the bones are identified, they're laid out on a table in the correct position. It's a start, but we're going to need a lot more bones to solve this mystery. Right, how's it going down here?
Very well so far. Bones are very fragile indeed. So it's a matter of just taking out the small fragments. So far we've worked our way down from the top end, which would be the head end of the coffin,
Yeah.
and we have gradually recovered everything so far down to about waist level here. You'll see here, and I'll put the torch on it just so they stand out, you can see here some body of some vertebrae.
Oh, that's a good sign.
Okay, so you've got better preservation in this middle area. There's another one. So you've got better preservation in this middle area than you had at the top end.
Okay.
We have got some problems, like this is a left humerus, which is your arm bone,
Which is just not,
which
it's
is just going to fall apart.
can't even be removed.
No, it's just going to fall apart. So that's going to have to be very, very
So
carefully done.
But there's no skull.
No. No
Okay,
skull.
so we know there's no skull.
No
Okay.
skull, no teeth, nothing that would indicate a skull was here.
That's interesting.
Yes. So we don't know if he had teeth, actually.
He was an old man, wasn't he?
Yes, but teeth will stay. Teeth will preserve really
Yeah.
very well because dental enamel is very stable and doesn't deteriorate as quickly as bone. So there's absolutely no indication a skull was ever here.
Interesting stuff.
Yes. So we're just going to carry on moving down.
So far we found a headless old man with arthritis.
Cool. That's very good. I mean, I've just been removing, so I know that Sue's been looking at that.
Okay, yeah.
I did see that the sacrum was male.
Yeah.
So, yes, then that so far fits what we're looking for. So
Brilliant.
far, thank you.
Over hours of painstaking work, all the remaining bones are removed from the coffin and identified. The question is, could this be the body of Simon Fraser, Lord Lovat? At last, Sue believes she has the answer. So Sue, what have we got here? What are we looking at?
Well, I don't know where to start actually, but we've laid it out as if you've got somebody on their back. Okay,
Yeah.
so the feet are at that end, the head are at this end. There's nothing goes beyond these vertebrae of the neck.
Okay.
So lower level of neck, there's nothing for this person that goes higher than that. So it hasn't got a head.
Okay.
It's probably a woman.
What? No!
And it's probably a woman in her 20s to 30s.
That is not Lord Lovat.
You're right. Okay.
So this was a different person to those first
Oh,
pieces.
we're not finished yet. Anywhere near finished yet.
Okay.
Oh, bear
Okay,
with
just
us.
keep going, right.
So, all of that fits. Look, there's the sacrum.
Yeah.
The sacrum's feminine.
Yeah.
When we were talking about small body, wide wings, that's a feminine sacrum. So wherever her head is, I don't know.
Maybe
It's
she-
not an 80-year-old man.
Okay.
Okay?
Fine.
But we've got her column, we've got her breastbone, we've got her right arm, her left arm, her right leg, her left leg, her right foot, maybe a bit of her left foot, not so sure, but a lot of debris. This all looks as if it belongs together.
Right. So it's a very complete skeleton of a young woman.
Without a head.
Well, I think that's quite cool.
On the other side, you come over here. Over here, we have a child's teeth.
What? What
So
are they
that-
doing in there?
So those are the crowns from a child's tooth. That's part of a child's jawbone.
Smaller than that? Yeah,
Oh,
because they're
tiny.
Different.
So this is going to be a child. I haven't got an age yet, but I would expect they were probably looking 4, 5, 6 sort of age. That's 2 people.
Okay.
The third person
Oh my goodness me.
is this chap, which was the first bone
This
that we
was the one
pulled
that we
out.
got very excited by. Yeah.
Because this is not belonging to anything else.
Okay.
This is masculine.
Yep.
This is a man. This is an elderly
Yes.
man.
Well, this
That's all there is.
That is Lord Lovat. I'm
No,
sure.
it's not Lord Lovat. So what will have happened is that in tidying up crypts and tidying up graveyards, those who look after graveyards find bones every now and again on the surface, and they tidy them away. And if you had a coffin downstairs that was open,
Prized
you
open
just,
the coffin.
you just pop it in because it's still on sacred ground. That's individual number 3.
And is that so? That's quite common,
Yes,
is it?
it is.
Yeah. Oh, right.
Individual number 4
What?
is possibly this one, which is the lower end of a left knee. It might belong to him, but I don't think it does.
Yeah.
That was individual number 4.
Wow.
Individual number 5.
Don't be silly. Stop
Individual
it.
number 5 is really interesting because these ribs, so these are ribs from the right-hand side, 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th and 6th ribs in anatomical position. So that means they've not been thrown in
interesting.
as empty bones, they've been thrown in with soft tissue. Can't explain it.
But they don't belong to the young woman.
They don't belong to that. They're far too well preserved. They don't belong with that. They don't belong with him. They don't belong with the child. That, it might be that, but that's too far apart. And then we've got this individual, which is a breastbone.
Hang on.
And it's a younger individual.
That's
But that could belong to that
okay.
because the ribs come forward onto the sternum. And so this could be one individual. So we've got 1, 2, 3, child 4, 5. but I haven't got an 80-year-old man. I'm so sorry. So,
Do you know what? I think we've just raised more questions than we've answered.
I think you have.
Well, Sue, I know this is what the science is all about. I feel a little bit disappointed, but I'm also excited by all the bodies
that
you
worries me. Why do we have a young woman with no head?
And also, she was laid out, as you say,
Yes.
anatomically properly within that coffin.
I think the coffin, she was the one put in the coffin on purpose. I think this is put in the coffin as tidy up.
So the question
Just
is,
who's she?
and you've got everything of her apart from the head.
Apart from the head. Apart from the head.
That's weird, isn't it? It's time to break the news to Sarah Fraser. This is the body that the team have recovered now.
It's extraordinary to see it, like without all the rubbish on it. Do you know what I mean? It's obviously a body. You know, there it all is.
It is a body. The one that you're looking at appears to be the body of a young woman.
A woman?
Yeah.
A woman? That's disappointing. That is really disappointing. Oh, golly. Well, bless you. Bless you, young lady, but I wish you were Lovat of the 45. They're forlorn, but they're very, very moving. They're moving to be with. And there is a way in which I wonder if at one level it matters, because what has always been the purpose of these bones is their symbolic life, is their life to the clan, to this region, and in the 1740s, their life to the Jacobites. Because after the Culloden, you know, this area under martial law, great privation, rape, pillage, and you need things to hang on to. You need souvenirs and you need relics. I mean, I'm sort of devastated it's not him, I have to say, of course I am. But she still speaks from history, you know. What a story. What an odyssey. How very fitting for Simon that it would end like this, don't you think?
Yeah.
I mean, you've been with him these last few days. You get a feel of the man, and how extraordinary that we would end with just not knowing. There's some way in which he keeps control of his story, and he would always like that, wouldn't he? Come on. You know he would. Bless you. Yeah.
The woman's bones are placed in a new coffin, along with the remains of the other individuals. For now, they'll all remain at rest here in the Lovat family mausoleum. One mystery is solved. Lord Lovat isn't buried in the family tomb. We can only assume he remains in an unmarked grave beneath the Tower of London. But we have another mystery. Who was the headless young woman placed inside the coffin with Simon's nameplate? The cunning fox, as always, has the last laugh. Thanks for watching this video on the History Hit YouTube channel. You can subscribe right here to make sure you don't miss any of our great films that are coming out. Or if you are a true history fan, check out our special dedicated history channel, historyhit.tv. You're going to love it.